post it clean. So
Hi, Dr. Andrews. This is my colleague, Miss Julie Beller, and she's helping me go over my lesson plan and giving me critiques on things that I could have done better and seeing if I did a good job kind of connecting to all the students. So here we go.
all right. So are there specific things you want me to kind of answer?
So I do have this Word document here.
Okay.
So pretty much like, let's see. So do you think that this presentation could be designed for all students, like depending on student assets and like their current assets or things you already know about them? Like, do you think that this could be encompassing all students?
Yes, I think it would be accessible to all students. I think there are things that I would recommend that would improve upon it being more accessible to different students. Um, One of the things that I did know would be I did like how you were typing some of the stuff as you were talking about it. I would recommend for different things like using change of color or like highlighting to kind of show the differentiation between an example versus like an actual line in the
Mm-hmm.
poetry. And then with the dum, like maybe changing that, alternating the color so we can see the difference between the caps and the lower caps.
Yeah.
Color coding, I think, is really helpful. When you talked about vowels, and you talked about long vowels, it would be nice to kind of have a visual aid to kind of show along the side. That kind of stays there as
Mm-hmm.
like a visual.
Like the whole time, like just kind of like
Yeah,
permanent there. Okay.
yeah, I think that would have been helpful. And then like I mean, I know it's online, so it's different. If you were in the classroom, what I would recommend is having some kind of like anchor chart or like visual aid with not only the long vowels, but
Would you say
broken
something
up
kind of like that,
syllables.
like the spelling
Yes,
rules?
my
Okay.
spelling rules, something
Okay.
like that, or like what is a verb? I have examples of what does a CER look like? How do you
Okay.
find the theme in literature? What are some common things? So like a visual aid,
Mm-hmm.
and then maybe a word wall. So when you introduce new words, they kind of know that those are new words and that maybe they shouldn't be familiar. Like they're not going to have background knowledge on them.
Okay.
So like some of the words you used but didn't define, like you said, scheme, that might be a word that is very unfamiliar,
Okay.
especially if it's an English language learner or a student with an IEP or,
Mm-hmm.
you know, just not ever exposed to that word. And then you did explain what a syllable was. Um, I think it was a little confusing because sometimes, like I said, I thought there was some confusion on your part too.
Like the difference between I was mixing up syllable and vowel.
Yes,
Okay. Yeah.
you were kind of using those interchangeably. So
Okay.
like making sure that you're really clear about the difference
Okay.
because it seemed a little fuzzy at times. Um, but yeah, I think if you could incorporate adding a little bit more visual aids, different colors, um, I think that'll help a lot to
Awesome.
kind of make it easier for students who maybe written language isn't super easy for them to access.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
Yes. Oh, and another thing I was going to say, sometimes with the words you use,
Mm-hmm.
what I would recommend you do is that you paraphrase words.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. So like when you're talking, um, so like say for example the word humorous. If the kid doesn't know that and you're using that as a way to define,
yeah, I use that in the definite. Yeah.
in the definition. Mm-hmm. So if I were to say, today we're going to talk about humorous poems, humorous, funny.
Yeah.
So you don't have to like go into a long detailed thing, but you just state it, rephrase it in a different way that maybe makes more sense for it. For example,
maybe rephrase it in like a word that I know that they use all the
yes.
time. Okay.
So for example, yes, they're going to rhyme. They sound the same.
Okay.
I just like paraphrase it within the same sentence.
Right.
I'm going to define a scheme or, kind of a rule or a pattern.
Right. Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So within it, while you say it, you offer that a word that may be more familiar.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's actually one thing that I really know I struggled with. Okay. Oh, do you know if there's any maybe like adapted? Oh, you already did that. You already said visual aids. That'd be like an adaptation support.
Yeah, you could do that. You could even provide like a visual if it were like a student who isn't a reader or visually impaired or something. You can provide a written copy for them to have in front of them. I know this is online, so this is different.
Yeah. Are there ways to do like with like hearing impaired students, I guess. Like I guess like the dumb to dumb is like really is
Is
really
gonna be very difficult.
okay. Do you know any other way I can make it more visual for them, like where they can kind of like visualize the sounds?
I would say you think of someone that is visually impaired, anything that you do tapping or clapping, they may not hear it, but they can, if they're acting it, if they're physically like kinesthetic learning, if they're clapping it out, stomping their feet, that vibration gives them an idea of like pause and then go, pause and go.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Um, wow, that just blew my mind a little bit. I don't know. I didn't even think of that when I was doing this.
Yeah.
Because like I said before, like while I was doing it, I kind of had that realization, like this maybe doesn't make like too much sense, or maybe I didn't really like get too acquainted with it before I started
That's
teaching
the
it.
biggest challenge when you first start teaching something. It's like I said, you think you know it, and then you go to explain it, and you're like, wait a minute, like now I feel tongue tied, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of, because I teach study skills, so I'm teaching different subjects, and there's sometimes where I just have to be honest. Like you're better off pausing and clarifying, making sure you understand it, than continuing down a rabbit hole of confusion, because
Okay.
it's very hard to unlearn something that they are like learning. Like to unteach something can be really challenging.
Okay, true.
So if you do find yourself in that moment where you're like, this seems confusing, give them something to do, take a break, like, because then you're going to get all nervous, especially as a new teacher, and just say like, hey, take a second, partner up with your neighbor, talk about a poem you like, or just come up with something on the whim.
Okay.
Always have those like on the whim things to do. Elbow partners is always a great one.
Oh yeah.
I know they're here, but you could do a breakout room for a couple minutes,
Okay.
or like look at the exit ticket. It's posted. Get an idea of what we're going to do, what I'm going to expect you to do, because front loading is always a good idea. And then make sure you feel confident before you continue.
Okay.
It's always like a good first, beginning teacher
Definitely.
tip.
So I kind of like had in my head a couple like focus students, and I didn't have any real students.
Yeah.
But I was kind of thinking along of students like Derek or like Kai or something.
Okay.
So do you think that like because I know both of them are pretty like opposite
personalities.
yeah, opposite personalities. So do you think that like if they were in the same room together, do you think that they would be able to both like understand this type of thing, like the way it was taught? I mean, if I like added your changes and everything, do you think if we put like two opposite personalities in the room, they would be able to like figure this out?
As far as personalities go, I think you might have some that, like one of those students would have more behavioral challenges for sure.
Okay.
Especially if you start saying you can stomp your feet, then you have to like think about your audience, like stomping your feet. Okay, well, anytime that you're going to have a student do something, whether it's work with like manipulatives, working with, anything that's tangential, or like use their body, you're going to want to make sure that you front load the expectations. Okay, so what's appropriate stomping? Like making sure that we're sticking right in front of ourselves. I don't want to see stomping where you're hurting anybody or getting out of your seat. Remember, we're staying seated. We're going to stomp because the point is to get the feel of the syllables and the counts. So if you can be clear about the expectation, then that'll help eliminate some of those potential maladaptive behaviors that you might see in the classroom.
And that's something I didn't even actually address at all in mine. I just realized I didn't even address like the correct way to do it or anything like that. I just said, hey, clap along with me. But yeah, I mean, now
like modeling though, but you did do some modeling, which was good.
Okay.
So you did provide some modeling. If this were a real classroom face-to-face, and you would want to walk around and check for understanding, because that would be like a formative assessment. A formative assessment is a way of, it's not a formal test, but it's a way of kind of checking, did they understand? Okay. Versus like a summative assessment would be like the end of a unit.
Like a chapter test?
Yes.
Okay.
So even your exit ticket is a formative assessment, which I think is really good, because you're checking to see what did they learn. And maybe they all got it, and maybe some did, or maybe it was a complete failure and you have to do it again.
Okay.
And that's reality of teaching. You have to be flexible.
So you've had lessons that you've had to repeat a bunch of times?
I have.
Okay.
Not a bunch of times.
But like at least a few. Like, yeah, obviously there's like gonna be a limit, right?
Yeah, I've had lessons that I've had to reteach, or especially when it came to math. I would say back when I taught math, I've had situations when I first started teaching. I had a science when I taught elementary school. not special ed.
Mhm.
I brought pine cones so they can kind of see the different cones, and we talk about reproduction plants, blah, blah, blah. And there were bugs in the pine cones, and my kids all lost their minds,
Yeah.
right? You know, it
Yeah.
was a sixth grade class. So I had at that point, my objective became classroom management because
Okay.
it got crazy. Don't talk over students if it's chaos.
Okay.
You can't teach in a chaotic environment, right? So
Okay.
in that moment, when I'm getting observed, I say, okay, everybody stop. And you have to be the calm so that they're calm. If you get all worked up and flustered, then they're gonna get flustered too.
Okay.
A thing I did notice was you saying like, this is not that hard, or being online isn't really fun. Like, we know that, but don't say it.
Okay. Yeah.
So I would
Just
advise,
put it in their head a little bit too much.
yeah, because you're kind of planting a seed of indifference, or like, this is going to be really hard, or like, he's confused, so like,
Okay.
shoot, I'm going to be confused.
Or
you
if
know?
I say if it's going to be easy, then I could be discounting people who might think
Yes.
it's difficult too.
Yes,
Okay.
you never want to say something is super easy, because then for those that are challenging, they're like, oh man, like, I don't want to ask for help
Okay.
because now I'm embarrassed because
Right.
this is easy,
Right.
and it's not easy for me. One of the things that I learned after years of teaching was when you call on students, instead of giving them a qualified answer, like when you say something of like, oh yes, we're awesome or fantastic, then all the other kids that might have answered differently won't be willing to take that academic risk,
Okay.
because
You said one was awesome. Or,
yes.
Okay.
So when you say yes, thank you, or yes, thank you, thank you, thank you, you will see more people are willing to answer your questions because they're not afraid of being told on the spot,
Okay.
I messed up.
Cool. Sweet.
Yeah.
I don't think I have any other questions. Are there any final thoughts you didn't? Are any post-its you didn't get through?
I would review syllables and long and vowels.
Yes, I will definitely review all that.
And then I would just, a good thing to do too, if you're going to give kids time to work on something independently, which I did like. You did the guided practice, and then you gave them independent practice. Is maybe using, like, when you're in the classroom, using a timer.
Okay.
Especially like a visual timer, so they can see it. There's a lot of different apps and stuff that you can do, like a countdown.
Okay.
So students kind of know like how much time they have left. That's always a good tip too when you're teaching.
Awesome.
But I mean, good job.
Thanks.
You'll get better.
Appreciate it. All right. Thanks, Dr. Andrews.